The sky above was thick with yellow smoke, and the sun never fully broke through. Dust covered everything's the ground, the broken metal huts, even the eyes of the people who lived in the slums on this forgotten mining moon. Here the mines had dried out years ago. What was left behind were the ones no one wanted: widows, orphans, broken machines, and broken lives. A human man named Diron walked slowly through the junk-filled alleys, his boots crunching over rusted metal and plastic scraps. He wore a heavy coat and carried a salvager's pack. He wasn't here to help anyone. He was only passing through, looking for scrap he could sell or parts he could repair. That's when he felt a small tug on his jacket. He turned. A little alien boy, no more than 6 or 7 years old, looked up at him with wide yellow eyes. Boy was barefoot, thin, and his clothes were torn. He didn't cry, he didn't beg, he simply looked up and said softly, "Sir, please help my mother. No one is helping her. She cries every night since my father left." Darren blinked. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. The boy still didn't let go of his jacket. "I just want someone to help her," the child whispered. Darren looked around. No one else was watching. No one cared. Behind the boy, too, older aliens walked by with dead eyes and empty hands. They didn't even look. He sighed. "Where is she?" The boy's face lit up just slightly. He took Darren's hand and led him quickly down a narrow alley. They passed burned-out lights and broken doors. Rats, or something worse, scattered underfoot. The smell was bad, like oil, smoke, and rot. Finally, they stopped outside a tiny shelter made of scrap metal and patched cloth. The boy pushed the cloth aside. Inside, the light was dim. The floor was just dirt. But there, sitting against the wall, was a woman. She was alien, like the boy. Her skin was pale lavender and bruised in many places. Her arms were too thin, her eyes sunken. She had long black hair tied back with a cloth band. But her eyes, when she looked up, still held strength. She didn't speak at first. The boy quickly stepped forward. "Mother, he said he'd help." Aaron cleared his throat. "I didn't exactly say that." The woman's gaze didn't change. "Then go. I don't want my son hurt because of false hope." Darren looked at her. He had seen soldiers bleed out with less pain in their voices. He slowly stepped inside. "I don't give false hope," he said, "but your boy begged me." She looked away. Darren knelt beside her. "You're injured?" "I slipped," she said. "No, you didn't." She didn't reply. He opened his pack. "Do you mind?" She didn't stop him. Darren pulled out a small med kit. He cleaned the dried blood on her arm and applied a biogel patch to the worst bruises. She winced but didn't pull away. Her boy sat silently in the corner, watching with wide eyes. "Where's your husband?" Diron asked quietly. She didn't answer. The boy spoke from the corner. He went to the deep mines. "A man came back with his helmet, said he died there, but Mother doesn't believe him." "She's right," Darren muttered, checking the bruises. "On her ribs. These aren't from a fall." She finally spoke. "He didn't die in the mine, he was taken. By the ones who run this place now, the gangs, the ones who sell people." Darren looked at her closely. "Why didn't you leave?" "Had a daughter too. She got sick. Couldn't find medicine in time, and after she died, I stopped trying." Darren paused. Then he pulled a sealed meal pack from his bag and handed it to the boy. "Heat this. Use that panel." He pointed to a cracked but still working heat plate near the wall. The boy ran over, excited. Darren looked back at the woman. "What's your name?" "Vera?" "Vera," he repeated. "You need help?" "Real help. Food, safety, a place to recover. We can't pay." "I didn't ask for payment. You're human." "That's already a risk," Diron shrugged. "I've faced worse risks." She stared at him again, less anger this time, more confusion. He stood up and looked around the small room. Then he said quietly, "You don't have to cry alone tonight." She lowered her eyes, and her shoulders trembled just once. Outside, the smoke in the sky darkened, but inside that little metal hut, something new flickered to life. Hope *. The next day began like any other in the slum's gray sky, dry wind, and the air thick with silence. But something had shifted inside that tiny shelter. Vera had not cried that night. She had closed her eyes beside her son, while the human, Duran, sat at the entrance, keeping watch with a quiet stillness that made the rats stay away. When morning came, Vera stirred to find a bowl of warm synth rice beside her and the boy curled. Against her side, breathing softly, she looked up. Darren was gone. She sat up quickly, a sharp pain shooting through her ribs. But before she could panic, the cloth door lifted and Darren stepped in, dragging 2 small canisters of clean water and what looked like protein sticks wrapped in foil. "You're back," Vera whispered. "I said I would be." He tossed one of the packs beside her. "Eat." Her son was already awake, eyes wide with hunger and hope. "You brought real food again." Daron gave a half smile and ruffled the boy's hair. "Don't get used to it." She watched him carefully. "Where did you get this?" "Traded some tools. Old stabilizers from a crashed drone near the ridge. Should have kept those. You came here for salvage." "I did," he replied, not looking at her. "And now I found something more important." Vera frowned. "Ah! What do you want?" "From us, human?" Duran met her gaze. "I want to know what happened to your husband." She hesitated. Her hands tightened around the food pack. "They said he died. Everyone believed it. But I found his cumpiece, weeks later, hidden behind. A pipe, scratched with a code only I would recognize. He left it there for me. So he was taken." She nodded. "By the Red Blades. They control the transport tunnels now. They don't just steal, they sell." Duran clenched his jaw. "Why haven't the authorities stepped in?" Vera almost laughed, bitter and cold. "Authorities? This moon doesn't exist to them anymore. No trade, no minerals, no worth. We're ghosts." Darren sat back against the wall. "I've seen this before. Fringe zones. Abandoned colonies. When power leaves, monsters move in." Her voice was lower now. "You shouldn't be here. Helping me is dangerous." "Not here to help," he said simply. "I'm here to fix something broken. This place is broken." The boy suddenly perked up. "We used to have lights, right, Mom? And music. My sister used to sing." Vieira's face fell. Darren caught it. "Your daughter? She died." Her voice cracked for just a second. "No one came when she was sick. The medbots had all been stolen. I held her until she stopped breathing." Duran closed his eyes for a moment. Then he stood. "Show me where they took your husband." Vera blinked. "What?" "You said he left a code. Show me." She hesitated again. Then she slowly got to her feet, motioned for her son to stay, and limped toward the back wall. She knelt beside an old pipe and pulled aside a panel of rusted metal. There, carved into the back wall, with what looked like a sharp rock, were symbols. Darren crouched beside her. Numbers, coordinates. Vera nodded. "He was trying to tell me where they moved him. I've never gone. I couldn't. Not with the boy." Darren studied the symbols, pulling out his own cracked datapad, typed quickly, cross-referencing. Maps of the area. "There's an old freight hub down here, Section 3K. Long sealed off. That's where they hold the ones they plan to sell off-world." He stood, already moving. "Wait," she said. "You can't go there alone. Be seen as a threat. A human. They'll shoot on sight. Then I won't let them see me." Vera stepped in front of him. "Why are you really doing this?" He paused, looking at Hurley, looking. Her eyes, though tired, still had fire. Her voice, though soft, carried. Wait. She hadn't given up. Not fully. Not yet. "Because your boy still believes in you," he said. "And no child should carry the weight of silence while their mother breaks apart." Vera looked away, blinking fast. Outside, voices echoed in the distance. Boots. Heavy steps. Darren froze. Vera whispered, "The slum enforcers. They patrol once a day, looking for anyone who breaks curfew. Do they know I'm here?" She shook her head. "Not yet." But it was too late. Outside a voice barked, "Anyone inside? Step out now. Illegal humans are not welcome here." Duran pulled back toward the rear wall. Vera pointed to a trapdoor hidden beneath a loose sheet of metal. Go. That tunnel leads to the old cooling ducts. What about you? I'll distract them. No. You want to save my husband. Let me do this part. Duran stared at her for a heartbeat, then nodded. He slipped through the hatch and disappeared into the shadows. Vera stood straight, wiped her face, and stepped outside. The guards raised their weapons, but she raised her chin even higher. Inside, the ducks. Duran paused, listening to the shouting above. This wasn't salvage anymore. This was war. And the woman who once cried alone now stood in front of guns. For him, and for something worth fighting for, Duran moved fast through the dark duct tunnel, crawling over rusted pipes and broken panels. The space was tight, and the air stank of oil and mildew. His palms scraped against rough edges. But he didn't stop. The boy's voice still echoed in his head. She cries every night since father left. And now Vera was facing armed patrols outside, risking herself so he could escape. Sing. He reached the end of the tunnel and pushed up a weak metal grate. It creaked loud, but he didn't hesitate. He rolled out into a collapsed corridor filled with dust and silence. This part of the slum hadn't seen life in years. Perfect. He checked his pad. The coordinates from Vera's wall carving pointed to a location nearly 2 miles away through gang territory. Collapsed tunnels and places even rats avoided. But if that's where her husband had been taken, then that's where Duran would. Godot still crouched. He scanned the room and paused. Something was there, an old power core, cracked and leaking slow blue energy. A memory stirred in him. Back when he was a tech specialist for the Earth resistance cores, he'd seen cores like that used as beacons. Tracking points. He took a cable from his belt and connected his pad to the core. The data was damaged, but he found something strange. Movement logs. Someone had come through this abandoned zone just 4 days ago. Not slum rats. Not looters. Trained footsteps. Tight patterns. Short intervals. Soldiers or slavers. He wiped the sweat from his brow. The situation was bigger than he'd thought. Back in Vera's shelter, the guards had finally gone. One of them had kicked over a crate and yelled at her, but she said nothing. She'd stood calm like stone until they walked away laughing. As soon as the sound of boots faded, she ran to the hatch. Her son, still inside, hugged her tight. "Where's the man?" he asked. "He's safe," she whispered. "He's going to help your father. Do you think he'll come back?" She looked down at the boy. "I don't know. But he's not like the others." The boy nodded slowly. Then he opened a box they'd hidden for months. Inside was something Vera hadn't dared touch in a long timer. Old engineering tools. Broken, yes, but they still worked if you knew how to use them. And she did. For the first time in what felt like years, she started rebuilding something. Far across the slum, Duran made his way to a rusted elevator shaft. It led down far beneath the surface. The map said it was sealed, but he wasn't ready to turn back. He forced the door open and climbed down using twisted cables and wall bolts. At the bottom, a heavy metal hatch blocked the way, sealed with a biometric lock. Alien design. He placed his palm against the panel. It flashed red. Then he did something no slaver expected. He rewired it. His fingers moved fast, cutting into wires, bypassing circuits. Hot wiring power from the leaking core he'd scavenged earlier. Seconds later, the door unlocked with a heavy clunk. Inside, the air was cold and quiet. Darren stepped into the hallway. Moving slowly, carefully. Every few steps, he paused, listened. In the distance, he heard voices low, muffled. He found a side room, storage, empty cages, chains, racks of clothing. And in the center, a table covered in strange implants and surgical tools. His stomach turned. This wasn't just a prison. This was preparation, modification, sale. He clenched his fists and moved on further in. He reached a viewing window, half shattered. Through it, he saw rows of cells. Inside each, dim shapes, people, Aliens. Some awake. Some not. He scanned the prisoners, then his pad. Matching biometric data from the chip Vera had saved. One match, back left cell. A man sat in the shadows. Head low, shirt torn. He looked barely alive. Darren moved fast. He reached the panel and hacked it. The door slid open. The man inside looked up, confused, then alarmed. "Who your name?" "Say it," Duran ordered. The man blinked. Taro Velron." Duran smiled, just slightly. "Your wife's waiting?" Taro tried to stand. His legs were weak. Duran moved to help him. "I thought I'd die down here," Taro whispered. "You almost did." Suddenly, a voice blared over the hallway, interchameleon language, sharp and urgent. They knew. Duran cursed and pulled Taro's arm over his shoulder. "We need to move, now." His footsteps rushed toward them. Duran guided the weakened man. Back through the halls. Behind them, alarms rang and red lights flashed. But Darren had already memorized his path out. Back at the surface, Vera's shelter had become a quiet center of activity. A few neighbors had peeked inside after the patrol left. Some were curious, others afraid. But when they saw her wiring, old systems back to life, lighting a small lamp, powering a heater, they began to ask questions. "You trust that human?" one old alien asked. "She didn't stop working. He didn't ask for trust. Gave it first." The others said nothing. But they stayed longer than they used to, and outside, the wind carried a new sound, not begging, not silence, humming, a child's voice singing softly, like his sister once did, in the tunnels below. Darren kicked open a side vent and climbed out into moonlight, dragging Taro behind him. He'd done it. He hadn't just salvaged metal, he'd salvaged a father, and something more powerful than that, a reason to return. The wind howled louder than usual that night, carrying the distant sound of sirens and shouting through the broken alleys of the slum. Most people stayed inside, afraid. They had learned over time that the only thing worse than a silent night was a noisy one. But Vera didn't hide. She stood just outside her shelter, holding her son's hand, her eyes searching the shadows. Her heart beat hard in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to take her boy and disappear into the ruins. But she stayed, because he said he'd come back. He'd gone into the underground prison for her husband. And if he didn't return soon, someone else would. Someone with guns, or collars, or worse. She whispered to her son, "If anything happens, you run. Back tunnel, remember?" He nodded silently. Then footsteps. She turned sharply, and her breath. Caught from the darkness, Darren appeared half-covered in dirt and blood, supporting a broken, shaking man. She gasped. Taro, her husband, lifted his head weakly. His eyes met hers. "You look older," he said with a faint smile. Vera ran to him, caught him in her arms, and for a moment, just a moment, the pain faded. Duran leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "You were right. He wasn't dead." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "How did you?" They weren't expecting a human who knew how to bypass old warlocks. She helped Taro sit down, but then froze in the distance. A sound echoed across the alley. Not one, not two. Engines. Daran turned toward the horizon, his face hardening. "They're coming." Vera's hands trembled. "The red blades. They must have followed you. I didn't lead them here. But maybe they guessed." Though, boy clutched his mother's side. "What do we do?" Duran looked around. "We hide, prepare, fight if we must." But the others in the slum, they had heard it too. Neighbors peeked from shelters, fear returning to their eyes. Old Crino, the same elder who once mocked Vera for trusting a human, approached. "You brought trouble," he said. "I brought him back," Vera replied coldly. "Something none of you tried," Crino grunted. "And now they'll burn us all for it." Another voice, gentler, came from behind. It was a young alien woman with a child on her back. "But she also brought light again. The heater works now. My baby slept warm last night." More voices rose. "She gave us back power. Water lines are working again. and the red blades have taken enough from us already. Duran stepped forward. Then don't run. Stand. Help me set traps. Barricades. If we push back once, they may not return. Someone in the crowd laughed nervously. You want us to? Fight slavers. Darren's voice turned sharp. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight for yourselves. For your children. For a night without fear. Silence. Then Kreno spoke again, slow and bitter. You sound like a soldier. Darren looked him dead in the eye. That changed everything. He wasn't just some lost scavenger. He was trained, and for the first time, these abandoned people had someone who knew how to fight. By nightfall, the slum had changed. Barricades went up across the main alley, piles of scrap, broken carts, and loose steel plating. Darren directed the setup, placing motion sensors, makeshift explosives, old shock coils they salvaged from forgotten tech. Vera rewired power grids with shaking fingers, restoring street lamps, charging shields, reconnecting door locks. That hadn't worked in years. Taro, though weak, insisted on helping. Let me stand, he growled, when Vera tried to stop him. You won't see me on my knees again. By midnight, the air had gone still. Children were hidden in the back tunnels. Vera stood with her son, holding a wrench in one hand and a modified pulse cannon in the other. Darren was up on the metal tower, scanning the distant hills with night. Optics. Then the lights came. 2 black rovers crept toward the slum entrance, armored. Fast and silent. Behind them, more figures followed. Red-marked armor. Full-body suits. Guns. Chains. Burn rods. The red blades had arrived. Darren clicked his comm positions. Stay low. Wait for my signal. Vera felt her hand shake, but her boy looked up at her, and she calmed. The first blast came from the left, an explosive mine Duran had buried under loose trash. The lead rover flipped in the air and crashed into a wall of junk. The second rover opened fire, blasting neon bullets at the slum barricade, but the wall held. From above, Darren dropped smoke bombs and flashed the light grid. The red blades were confused. This slum was supposed to be weak, silent, easy. Now it fought like a fortress. A voice shouted from the back. Fall back. It's a setup. But it was too late. The people had risen. Taro stood beside Daron, swinging a shock spear into the chest of a slaver, who got too close. Vera dragged a wounded teen to cover while firing blasts into the dark. Even old Kreno lit a torch and shouted curses from the rooftops. When the last slaver fell, crawling back to the dunes, bleeding and broken, the slum fell into silence again. But it wasn't fear this time. It was awe. They had one dot together, not because of numbers, because of belief, and because one human had listened to a boy in the dirt and followed him home. The boy stood beside Darren now, looking at the horizon. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. Daron watched the distant smoke rising. If they do, he said softly, we'll be ready. And beside him, Vera stood not as a widow, not as a broken woman, but as someone whole again, because the night she cried alone was over and her story was just beginning. Asterisk, the morning sun cut through the dusty sky with a soft orange light. The slum was still quiet, but something had changed. Vera looked around her little shelter. The cracked walls seemed less empty. The air felt lighter. The heaters hummed steadily, and the small lamps flickered gently in the corners. Children laughed faintly in the distance, a sound she hadn't heard in a long time. Her son ran toward her, a wide smile on his face. Look, Mother, I fixed the old radio. It's working. Vera's heart lifted. She followed him to the corner where he had stacked old parts and wires. The small device crackled and popped, sending a weak but clear signal across the slum. This means help could come, she whispered. Daron stepped inside, his boots kicking up dust. He looked tired but determined. We have to do more, he said, voice low. The Red Blades will not forget what happened last night, Vera nodded. Then we need to be ready. Not just to fight, but to survive. Together, They gathered neighbors in the central square. People from every corner of the slum arrive, old, young, broken, hopeful. Vera stood beside Duran, speaking for the first time to the crowd. "We have one chance," she said simply. "To fix what was lost, to build something new. Not just to defend, but to live." Murmurs spread. Some nodded, others looked unsure, but all eyes were on her. Duran pulled out a map from his pack. "There is a ruined factory near the edge of the settlement. It has power generators and storage. We can take control, we can rebuild, make this place safe." A man in the back spoke up, voice rough. "The factory. It's where the red blades come from. No one who goes there comes back." Vera's eyes met Darren's. "Then we take the fight to them. Together." Crowd was silent again, then slowly began to move tools, weapons. Plans forming like sparks in the dark. That night, Vera and Daron walked through the slum, side by side. Her husband Taro followed carefully behind. Vera's hand brushed Darren's arm. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For not turning away. For fighting." Darren smiled, but his eyes were serious. "We're not done yet." At the edge of the slum, they reached the ruined factory. Its towering walls were scarred with old battles and rusted steel. The gates were locked tight, guarded by two heavily armed sentries. Vera watched as Darren moved silently toward the shadows. He whispered, "Stay close. Watch the boy." Using the skills of a soldier and a thief, Darren slipped past the guards, disabling one quietly, then the other. A soft click and the gates creaked open. Inside was darkness, thick as smoke. Machines loomed like ghosts. Pipes hissed softly. Somewhere deep inside, life pulsed in danger. Vera's breath caught. "This place is a tomb," she said. Darren nodded, "but it's the key to our future." They moved through the shadows, avoiding patrols and traps. Suddenly a harsh voice echoed down the corridor. "You shouldn't be here," it growled. From the shadows a tall figure stepped forward, a woman in heavy armor, scarred and cold-eyed. Vera's heart froze. Duran raised his hands. "We come for peace." The woman laughed bitterly. "Peace? There is no peace here, only control." Vera stepped forward. "We want freedom, for our children, for this place." The armored woman's eyes softened, just for a moment. Then she drew a blade. "This ends now." Fight was brutal, but brief. Vera, Duran, and Taro moved with fierce determination. The factory walls echoed with their struggle. When it was over, the woman lay on the ground, breathing hard. Vera looked at her, seeing not an enemy, but someone broken like herself. "We don't have to be slaves," she said quietly. The woman looked up, surprised. "Help us build a future, not destroy it." For a moment, silence filled the factory. Then the woman nodded slowly. Outside, the first light of dawn broke through the smoke. Vera looked at the rising sun and smiled. They had won more than a battle. They had one hope. The slum was no longer just a place to survive. It was a place to live. And for the first time in many years, Vera dared to believe. The future was theirs to build. The days after the factory takeover passed like a whirlwind. The slum was alive with change. Lights flickered on in places long dark. Water flowed in cracked pipes. Voices sang, argued, and laughed again. Vera stood on a rusted rooftop looking over what was once a broken place. Now it was a spark of hope. Her son played nearby, his laughter echoing like a new song. But beneath the surface, the danger had not vanished. One evening, Duran returned with a grim look. His clothes were torn, and his face bore fresh cuts. "They know we took the factory," he said, voice low. "The Red Blades are sending reinforcements. Worse than before." Vera's heart tightened. How many? Too many. And there, closing in fast. Taro, standing beside her, clenched his fists. "We must prepare to fight." "No," Vera said quietly. "We must prepare to survive." Daron frowned. "Survive? You mean run?" "No," she shook her head. "We can't outrun them forever. Need a plan that keeps everyone alive, gathered the leaders of the slum old Crino. The young mother with the child, even the armored woman they had fought before, together. They worked through the night, crafting defenses, evacuation routes, safe houses. Vera took charge of the children and the sick, making sure they had food, water, and places to hide. Daron trained the able-bodied in combat. Taro repaired old weapons and built traps. Days later, the sky darkened with the approach of the Red Blades fleet. Hovercrafts and drones filled the horizon. Casting long shadows over the settlement, Vera stood with her son, holding his hand tight. "Stay close," she whispered. The first wave hit like a storm. Explosions ripped through the outskirts. Lasers and gunfire lit the night, but the slum was ready. Darren's traps slowed the enemy. The shock coils disabled drones. The people fought. With fierce courage born of desperation, Vera moved through the chaos. Guiding the vulnerable to safety, healing wounds, giving strength, hours felt like days. Blood stained the ground, but the slum did not break. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. Darren saw her first. The armored woman from the factory, she moved with purpose, cutting through enemies, rallying the fighters. Beside her, a squad of new soldiers, humans. Darren's eyes widened. Humans? How? The woman met his gaze. "We're not all enemies," Vera gasped. "More of your kind?" "Yes," the woman nodded. "We heard the radio. We came to help." The tide turned. With new allies, the slum pushed back the Red Blades. The battle was fierce. At dawn, the enemy retreated, exhausted but alive. The people of the slum gathered in the square. Vera stood beside Daron and Taro. Her son ran to her, eyes shining. "You saved us," he said. Vera smiled through tears. "No, we saved each other." Daron looked at the rising sun. "This is only the beginning," Vera nodded. "But now we have a chance. A real chance." And as the first light touched the broken city, hope burned brighter than ever. The weeks that followed were a blur of rebuilding, healing, and planning. The slum was no longer just a place of broken dreams. It was a home, a fortress, and a symbol of hope. Vera stood at the edge of the settlement, watching her son play with other children near the rebuilt fountain. Their laughter rang through the air, mixing with the hum of machines and the chatter of people who once only whispered in fear. Beside her, Taro rested his hand on her shoulder. "Look how far we've come," Vera smiled, but her eyes searched the horizon. Danger had not disappeared. The Red Blades might have retreated, but they were not defeated. Darren approached, his face grave but resolute. "They're gathering forces on the far moon. They plan to return." Vera nodded. "Then we prepare. It's not just to defend, but to take back what was stolen." The people agreed. United, they trained, built ships from scavenged parts, and forged weapons from forgotten tech. The slum was becoming a beacon, a place others would rally to. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a message crackled over the restored radio network. "It's from the outer colonies," Darren said. "They want to join us." Vera felt a spark ignite inside her. The story of their fight was spreading. They were no longer alone. The next day, the sky filled with ships, small freighters, scouts, even old warships once thought lost. Aliens from different worlds came to stand with them. Vera's son tugged her hand. "Mother, will we be safe now?" She knelt, looking into his hopeful eyes. "We will be, because we fight together." The final battle came swift and fierce. Red Blades returned with full force, expecting to crush the slum once and for all. But what they met was a united fleet and a community transformed. Daron commanded the ships with skill and courage. The fighters on the ground moved like a single mind, defending every street and every home. Vera led the people with quiet strength, healing the wounded and inspiring the weary. The battle raged through the day and into the night. When the last Red Blade ship fled into the stars, the slum erupted in cheers. Freedom was theirs. Vera looked at the crowd faces glowing with tears, smiles, and fierce pride, Taro took her hand. We built this together. Duran stepped forward, and this is only the beginning. The galaxy will hear our story. Vera's son ran to her, holding a small, shining crystalline ancient artifact found during the fight. Mother, this is for you. She held it close. Feeling the weight of their journey, the pain, the hope, her eyes met Darren's. We are not broken, she said softly. We are stronger than they ever imagined. The sun rose over the slum, no longer a place of despair, but a beacon of hope for all who believed in courage, unity, and the power of humanity. And somewhere, far in the stars, the story of Vera. Darren and the slum would inspire generations to come, because when no one helped, they helped themselves. Because when a human listened to a boy's cry, they changed the fate of a world. Because together, they were unstoppable. The end, asterisk.